Good evening. My name is Brother Steve Jones. I'm the General Chair for Voteless People is the Hopeless People. I want to welcome you to our 2022 post-midterm election overview. And before we get started, as a reminder, for those that may not be familiar with Alpha Fraternity, our fraternity develops leadership, leaders, promotes brotherhood and academic excellence while providing service and advocacy for our communities. We want to welcome you to tonight's session. If people were on our last webinar, just before the election, we made a statement that regardless of the outcome of that election, we were still going to be fighting. And I think all would agree that with the election process completed, with some easiness still with the economy, with the House of Representatives in somewhat flux, issues within the Senate, issues with our gubernatorial elections, that we're still going to be fighting going forward. So we as a brotherhood, as a fraternity, as men, we must stay focused and ready to continue on the fight. So tonight, we want to kind of recap the activities of this election cycle and highlight the election results, Senate and governor races. I also want to recognize those brothers that we elected or re-elected to public office. We're also going to have a presentation or discussion by Brother Charles Houston from the Southern region to talk about his regional perspective. And they'll conclude with a summary and closing. Alpha Fraternity, unlike some of the Divine Nine, we have the VPHP committee, which I chair. And also we have a political and civic engagement, which is chaired by Brother Carl Pickney. We kind of do a tag team on these events because his committee deals with the public policies issues for the fraternity. So as we entered this last election cycle, these were some areas of focus that were important to us in terms of community and to the fraternity. As we go forward, these issues will still be an ongoing factor as we look at the elections in 2023, 2024, and beyond. The issues may change, but regardless, there will be stakes, mile markers in the coming elections that we'll need to address. So as we take a look at where we've been in this election cycle, just want to highlight a couple of articles and reference materials. Keep in mind that we're all very busy and we may get our news from multiple sources, but part of what we want to do with this committee is to provide information and resources so at a later date, brothers or people that may be watching this session can refer to some of these articles. So the first one up we'd like to take a look at, from a high-level overview, what was the breakdown of this 2022 election? As you can see, and the numbers have not been proven out yet. We're still waiting for the final tally to be completed. But it's interesting to see that in terms of the African-American voter number of areas, we were slightly down from 2018. You can see in certain cases, Republican turnout was slightly higher. But due to these numbers, where there was talk about this big red wave did not materialize because we did get out the vote. Not to the level of 2018, but significant enough to hold the tide. When we take a look at the breakdown again, one of the key factors of this 2022 election was the youth vote. As you can see, in a number of cases, the youth vote was very critical to the outcome of this election. And once again, we'll talk more about that as we get more information about the data from the 2022 election, which really won't be available until the first quarter of 2023. There also were a number of takeaways. This article, if you're interested, gives you 11 takeaways that were identified by the National Conference of State Legislatures. But as you're aware, there was no big red wave, as we thought there would be. Democrats in certain cases did pick up a few state houses. The economy still is an issue. Voter suppression is still an issue. So at this time, let's take a review of the results. If you look at this chart, as you can see, for the Senate elections, the ones in red were the Senate seats that were basically open. So as you can see here, that pretty much they held. If it was Republican office, they held. it was a Democrat they held. In certain cases, you will see, though, as a case of Pennsylvania, it was flipped from Republican to Democrat. Also, take a look at the percentage of electoral votes. In a number of cases, they're pretty tight. If you look at Wisconsin, where there's another African-American male that was running for that Senate seat, depending upon the turnout, had there been higher participation, that might have been a difference. So we want to keep track of these numbers to kind of see where we ended up in 2022, what those margins are for victory, what the percentage were, because that's an indicator of going forward where we may be able to make a difference if, in fact, we can get voter turnout to be higher. Part of what we do, once again, is the voter registration, but we also need to ensure that we're actually getting people to the polls on election day. And a lot of organizations are doing that. We make sure we're doing our part. We're engaging our community to get the vote turnout. Gubernatorial races. Once again, in certain cases, you see in Arizona that was flipped from Republican to a Democrat. Also, you can see the margins here. They're very tight races in gubernatorial races. You can see in Georgia, Stacey Abrams run against the incumbent. That candidate won by 2 million votes, basically 53% of the vote. Another interesting thing is when we take a look at this, also we see in Nevada, that was a Democratic governor. Because of COVID, there's some belief that that was an issue where he was replaced by a Republican. Interesting, in Texas, relatively close with 4.4 million votes. The governor won there by 54.8%. But one thing we need to take a look at, and we will do this, is in those states where you have a high Black population, what was the Black non-voting portion? If, in fact, we can get those numbers up, once again, that may have made a difference in the election. Once again, we don't tell people who to vote for. We just want to make sure they are aware of the issues and that they're voting their interests. Also, as I go through this presentation, if you have any questions, please post in the comments section, and we'll try to catch it at the end of this presentation. This is a good news section for the brothers. We want to recognize Brother Pastor Warnock for his re-election, Brother Wes Moore, new governor-elect for Maryland, and also Brother Eric Russell, who is the state treasurer for Connecticut, elected. As we go forward and we recognize those that won election and been reelected, you'll see from the list that we provided, which is not a complete list, but we need to take a look at how we can take the brothers that are either elected or reelected, how we can engage those brothers in our regional and district meetings to basically share their experience to encourage the young members of the fraternity, if they desire political office, what's required to make that happen. So as you can see here in Congress, the number of brothers that were either elected or reelected. State legislatures. It's very important to kind of know where we've been in this process. And it is doable. Another thing to take a look at is when we have our state capital days, how can we partner with those that are elected as state legislatures? How can we work with them to get an audience in those various state legislatures to talk about the issues that are important, not only to Alpha Fraternity, but also to our community? We also 2 mayors, one reelected, a new mayor for Long Beach, California. Also, we talked about the down ballot. So we spent a lot of time looking at the big ticket races for governor, senator, House of Representatives. But clearly, when we take a look at city, county, school boards, those are other areas where brothers are strongly participating. And we just want to encourage that and understand how they're being successful and how we can get that message shared to other people that may have an interest in politics or in community service. Once again, we see Texas, Raleigh, DC, Maryland, Michigan. Also, school boards are very important. And we'll talk about the future off-year elections and the presidential elections in a few moments. But congratulations to those brothers that were elected or reelected. We ask them to hold the light high, to support their constituency, and to make sure they're in the struggle to help advocacy for our communities. At this time, I'd like to bring in Brother Charles Houston from the Southern region to talk about his program successes that he was exposed to in the 2022 midterm. So, Brother Houston, please share.
Brother Jones, thank you so much, and thank you for the information and us being able to convene tonight. Brothers, good evening. My name is Charles Benjamin Houston. It is my honor to represent the Southern region as the VPHP chair. And let me start off this by saying thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to give a special shout out to my Georgia district, our Georgia chapters, led by Brother Lost, then Brother Rocky Marsh. You all did an excellent job in continuing and just keeping up the fight as we had to go into the runoff for not only the Senate, for the Georgia Senate seat, but for our dear brother, the Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock. So I wanted to send a special thanks to you all for that. And that's really three or four major things I wanted to hit on going forward. And one of those key things is that as we are catching our breath from this last fast midterm election, we'll regather, we regroup, and then we get ready to get back into it. As Brother Jones said, we are partnered with, especially with Brother Pinckney in the political action to make sure that we are, joined at the hip, lockstep going forward. But in that, we know that we are only as strong as the relationships that we have. We are only as strong as those thank yous that we give during this time. So one of the key things I want to make sure that brothers are keeping in their mind, those groups that you've partnered with, be it the NAACP or one of the groups that we worked with, Equal Ground, the local churches that you did Souls to the Polls with, whatever the case may be, those who really were able to just help magnify what Alpha was doing out in the community, please remember to say thank you in whichever way in which you can. I know that in my region, we've been doing some basic thank you cards, little tokens, mementos from us, just saying thank you for the work that was done out in the area, out in the street. So just let's make sure that we focus on that to take care of that going forward as we do recharge, because in the South we've got 3 gubernatorials in 2023, and then of course the Montrose of 2024. But just to reemphasize what Brother Jones has stated earlier, we are locked in, we are tight with the political action chairs, so that way we can continue to keep what matters, keep what's important in the forefront, and that is the community, that is the people. I will be pushing to incentivize our community contact initiative. That is one of the things that we're going to be doing in the South under the Get Out to Move campaign that we have. We are going to be rewarding, incentivizing those chapters in each of the 7 districts. I'm sorry, in each of the 7 states that are doing the most as far as their community contact, really making it so that the people don't feel as though we only come about when it's time to once again get them to do what's going to help them in their civic duty, but that we are at those county council meetings. We're being those good ambassadors in the area, and we're getting the word out. So that's one of the initiatives I wanted to push. You'll be hearing more about that later. You'll also be hearing more about how can I best serve, how can my office best serve that of the Brotherhood in the Southern region. It'll be going out to the districts, a survey, a little questionnaire, roll back to my office towards the beginning of the new year, just to let me know what's good, what can be improved, and how we can just continue to go forward and hold high the light of Alpha. So that's part of our infrastructure rebuild. Gentlemen, those are really the things I wanted to highlight and say. Again, as I'm asking you all to go out and thank others, I want to say again, thank you all very much for the hard work in which you've put in, for the work that you will continue to do. As it says, first of all, servants of all, we shall transcend all. But also, as goes Alpha South, so goes Alpha. Back to you, Brother Jones, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brother Houston, for those words. And really, It's very important that, as he mentioned, that those that we've partnered with, such as When We All Vote, NAACP, and others, a thank you note would probably be very helpful because truthfully, the ground game is just still getting started again. It's like a reset. So thank you very much, Brother Houston, for those words, and let's keep those in focus. So as we get ready to get towards the close here, we try to keep these to 30 minutes. I want to cover a few more things. So for those chapters, if you did any event in the 2022 election cycle, we ask that you send a photograph or information description. We're going to capture that information, send it to the VPHP at afa1906.net. We're capturing that information. And what we like to do at the General Convention is to kind of showcase what the chapters have been doing during this past election cycle as part of the General Convention. So if you have information, please file that profile, please submit that, and we'll get that captured and try to make a slide deck, a collage of activities of brothers and chapters around the country. So as mentioned, the fight continues. Democracy, it looks like it's going to be on the ballot, who knows, for the next decade or so. Voter suppression. It's interesting to note that as much activity as conversations about Georgia and what they did to try to suppress the vote, people showed up. They got a workaround. There's a recent article only a few days ago that due to success of the voter turnout, Georgia is now looking ways to possibly expand that voter suppression to make it harder to vote. So that's a troubling concept. America should be the ability to vote without all these hindrances. The other thing, which we also talked about earlier when at our first presentation back in July, was the issue of gerrymandering districts. The case, I believe last week about North Carolina, where the state legislature wants to basically take any discussion about voting districts out of the hands of the courts and let it remain strictly with the legislature. In that case, North Carolina is pretty much a 50-50 state. But because of census and who owns the legislative process for redistricting or gerrymandering, they wanted to change the district to be basically, I believe, something like 10 Republican districts and only 3 Democratic districts. The court said foul, so they kept the districts pretty much the same, but the legislature has went to the Supreme Court to appeal that. Hopefully that will not pass. Hopefully the Supreme Court will hold the line against this type of activity. That's on one end. That was the pretty much the Republicans in North Carolina. But likewise, you have issues in Ohio. Another case in point, early in the election cycle, the state of New York, where at that time they tried to do redistricting. The Democrats were controlled, and they did such a bang-up job that the courts came in and said, nah, I think you went too far. The Democrats overstepped their reach, and the Supreme Court in New York came back and basically said, no, you got to have 4 more districts, and they kind of twisted them towards Republican. So as we go through this whole process of what it takes for us to be successful in terms of democracy, overcoming voter suppression, making sure that we have equal footing in our state legislatures, we need to be ever vigilant about the forces that are coming after us. You know, we have a dog in this. We have a fight. But if we are not vocal, if we don't stand up, if we're not in the trenches advocating the policies that go against our best needs, that's on us. So I'd say to the brothers and those that are listening, if you're like-minded, if in fact you're looking for fairness, equity in this country, we have to make sure that we're maximizing our vote. Additionally, we need to make sure that we're vetting candidates. It's interesting to note that after the Georgia election, pretty much all the bad news about one candidate came out after the fact. Well, for some voters, it may have been more helpful had that information came out ahead of time. But let's understand how politics works. People want to keep everything on the rug until after the election. So we have to be more knowledgeable, more educated. That's why it's important for us to take a look at candidate forums so we can actually have the candidates talk to us in our communities about their goals, their objectives, and how our vote for them will be a positive vote for our communities. So let's keep that in mind that the fight continues. So at this time, if there are any questions, I can look at the comment sections. If there are any questions, I thank those that have came out and participated in this. So going to the next slide, I'm still waiting for questions. As Brother Houston mentioned, and also as Brother Warnock mentioned on his campaign speech, that pretty much you can go to the mountaintop and dance for a day, but the next day you're in the valley fighting. So with that in mind, we have in front of us in 2023, not only 3 governing elections, but also there's local elections in our community. You see what's available in 2024. Well, once again, we'll have the whole House up. We'll have the Class 1, 33 Senate seats. There will be 11 governor races. One way to kick off your election cycle, if in fact in your community, if you're having an MLK weekend, please consider doing a voter registration drive. So in certain states, the voter registrations, if in fact you can do those, they require you to be renewed each year. So in the case of Colorado, to do a voter registration drive, that expires in December. So in Colorado, if that's something that you want to do, I encourage those brothers to get the education and training so they can do a voter registration drive at the MLK March in Denver. For other cities, other communities, same thing. If you have an event, understand what's required to start your voter registration process. So that could be an ongoing thing for the fraternity that every MLK, that's when we start voter registration and start the dialogue of engaging our communities about voting. At this time, as I said, we try to keep these to 30 minutes. Once again, on behalf of the General President, our regional leadership, we want to thank the college alumni chapters that have done the work in 2022. Because some were probably worried about that election day, how it would turn out, would be the big red wave, how would it be. But democracy held, folks. And so we want to thank those that put the work in, that could see the vision, that could see what was at stake, and wait those long lines to cast their ballot. It's important. So we are hoping at the General Convention to have some time set aside where we can actually work with individual chapters, college alumni, to understand what's important to you, what your needs are, what your requirements are as we go forth in the 2023 and 2024 election. It's important. So hopefully as we get closer to General Convention, we'll have more information about how we plan to provide that information, what's the breakout session or informal meetings. But it's very important that chapters think about what they need to do to be successful, what the lessons learned from this 2022 midterm, and how we can be better and more effective going forward. At this time, I don't see any additional questions. I thank those that have participated. I can see the people who have logged on. Please share this link with others. We look forward to your support. We look forward to your engagement. And we'll probably be doing more of these webinars in the future, and maybe on different topics, but to start trying to inform our communities about the importance of voting, because every vote does count. And if you don't vote, you did vote. So let's make sure we understand the importance, and let's never be distracted. People have died, bled for the right to vote. Let's not fall down on our watch. Without anything else, folks, I once again thank you very much for your time. Brother Houston, thank you very much. Brother Hauser behind the scenes, thank you very much for supporting this webinar this evening. And we're under 30 minutes. So folks, thank you very much. Have a great evening. Happy holidays and a very successful and prosperous new year. Thank you and good night.